Alright, how's everybody doing to this evening? Back again with you guys and gals, and tonight what I have for everyone is my versus / comparison video between the OG, the Moto X Pure Edition, and the new kid on the block, the Moto G6. Now, I know, I told you guys the Moto X Pure Edition was retired, but you know, I gotta occasionally dust them off every now and then and take them out of retirement and see if he can still hang with some of the latest and greatest devices. So we're gonna see how he stacks up against the Moto G6. Alright, that being said, the first thing I want to talk about with you guys and gals is the overall build quality and design between both of these devices. And I know, yes, I know, both of these devices are in a case, but that will in no way, shape, or form change my opinions on how I feel about either of these devices. That is just for safety purposes, because you guys know, or maybe you're new to the channel, but your boy is a clumsy savage. Look man, I dropped almost all of my devices at least 5 to 7 times. So a case and screen protector is mandatory for me. And if you can rock your devices butt naked, no case, no screen protector, oh man, congratulations, because you're a lot better than me at that. But that being said, let's get into the build quality and design on both of these devices. Now, talking about the build quality and design on both of these devices, this is pretty much where you're going to see one of the biggest differences. Starting off with the Moto X Pure Edition. The Moto X Pure Edition is pretty much made out of a grippy plastic material, a metal mid-frame, and then a glass front design. And talking about the overall build quality on the Moto X Pure Edition, I have to say it is top notch. All of the buttons are very clicky and give you a nice, responsive, and tactile feedback to them, and everything just works and feels very solid in the hands. And I really do appreciate the fact that for this year of Moto device, they went with a big device, but it also has a nice taper that contours to the hand. So really good stuff in terms of the build quality and design, Motorola, for when you were coming up with the Moto X Pure Edition. Alright? So in terms of the build quality, it's top notch. Now jumping over to the build quality on the build quality and design on the Moto G6, I have to say this is where Motorola decided to update their design to a more modern look. So we have the glass on glass approach here, Gorilla Glass 3 on the front and back with a metal midframe. But they still managed to maintain their responsive, tactile, and clicky buttons, and the Moto G6 again feels very solid in the hand with a really nice weight. Excuse me, had to catch my breath. So, in terms of the overall build quality on both of these devices, I would have to call it a tie. Now, in terms of the overall design, this is where I say it comes down to personal preferences, but let's point out those differences. So, as you can see, up front dead center here, we have 5.7-inch IPS LCD displays on both devices, but in particular, what you may not be able to notice is that we have a Quad HD panel here, and we have a 1080p panel here. Okay, so we got the 18:9 aspect ratio here on the Moto G6, and we got the 16:9 traditional aspect ratio on the Moto X Pure Edition. Another design thing that you may have noticed is that we have a front-mounted capacitive fingerprint sensor on the Moto G6, whereas we don't have any fingerprint sensors on the Moto X Pure Edition. And now, probably one of the biggest design changes between the devices is on the rear of the device. So if I flip these both around, you guys and gals can see that on the rear of both of these devices we have a 21 megapixel one primary setup on the Moto X Pure Edition, whereas for this year, Moto decided to go with a dual camera configuration with one 12 megapixel sensor and one 5 megapixel depth sensor. They both incorporate LED flash. Really good stuff there. Alright. And now, jumping back to the front of the device and flipping it down to the bottom, you guys can see both of these devices maintain their 3.5mm headphone jacks, but they are in different locations. It's on the bottom corner with the Moto G6, whereas it's top center on the Moto X Pure Edition. Alright? Now, another big design change here is that we finally upgraded, finally, from micro USB on the Moto X Pure Edition to USB Type-C on the Moto G6, and we still maintain our turbocharging. So really nice to see that. Okay? Another big change in design is that the dual front-firing speaker approach is now gone. It's been replaced with a single top-firing front-mounted speaker on your Moto G6, which also doubles as your receiver. So, that's more of an unwelcome design change, but they did it, and it is what it is. So, that pretty much covers the build quality and design aspects of both of these devices. Okay? That being said, you guys and gals are probably wondering, which one do I prefer? And I have to say, in terms of the overall build quality, I'm going to call it a tie. In terms of the overall design, I'm going to have to call it a tie or personal preference. I actually think both of these devices look really good, and they both feel very solid in the hand. And in particular, I was very interested to see the overall evolution in design when we come to Motorola's devices. So I'd have to call it a tie on both those fronts, but really it comes down to personal preference. Now, moving on, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys and gals is the overall displays in both of these devices. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that display category. Now, up front, dead center here on the Moto X Pure Edition, as I said, we have a 5.7-inch IPS LCD display with a screen density of 520 pixels per inch, and that is because we have a quad HD panel on this guy at 2560 by 1440p in the 16:9 aspect ratio. Whereas over here on the Moto G6, we have again a 5.7-inch IPS LCD display, but in particular for this one, we have an 18:9 aspect ratio and a 1080p display with a resolution of 2160 by 1080p and a screen density of 424 pixels per inch. But putting the numbers aside, I have to say that both of these displays perform extremely well in day-to-day performance, and I've had little to no issues with either of these displays. Now, pointing out some differences, I found that in direct sunlight, I have to keep the Moto X Pure Edition anywhere from about 50% brightness to 80% brightness. Indoors, I keep it at about 35% brightness. Whereas on the Moto G6, I'm keeping this guy at max any 50% brightness. Indoors, I'm keeping this guy anywhere between 10% and 25% brightness. So it really is a really good display. So, that being said, in terms of display, who wins? I'm going to have to call it a tie. And my whole reason for that is a good display is a good display. I'm not really one for resolutions and high pixel densities and all that stuff. All I want is a nice, high quality, good display. The manufacturer can give me 720p, he can give me 1080p, he he can give me Quad HD, he can give me 4K. The only thing that I care about is that I have a nice quality display with no issues, and it works exactly how it's supposed to on a day-to-day basis. And I'm very happy to report that both of these devices do that no problem. So in terms of displays, I'm going to have to call it a tie. Now, diving a little bit deeper into the hardware and software in these devices, let's do this. Now, talking about the Moto G6, in terms of hardware, we have 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of onboard storage with micro SD card expansion, and I'm very happy to report to you guys that you can use either of these micro SD card slots as adaptable and expandable storage as long as you pop in a nice high quality micro SD card. So good stuff there. Jumping back onto the Moto G6, this guy has a 3000 milliamp hour battery. Again, we have 12 megapixel camera on the rear and a 5 megapixel depth sensor. We have an 8 megapixel camera up front. We have one front mounted speaker, which also doubles as our receiver grill. We have a very fast capacitive fingerprint sensor along the bottom. We have those rich power buttons, micro USB Type-C, and in terms of the chipset, we're packing a Snapdragon 450 octa-core processor and an Adreno 506 GPU. Alright, in terms of the software, we're running Android 8.0 Oreo, and it's pretty much a stock affair with Motorola's custom features thrown in, and pretty much we're going to cover those features after we talk about the hardware and software on the Moto Xperia Edition, because there's a lot of similarities and there's a few differences. But in terms of the software on the Moto G6, it's pretty much top notch, and we pretty much have a stock affair with a few custom gestures thrown in. My only downside in performance with the G6 is that we get the occasional app slowdown with a bunch of apps open in the background, and I did notice a lot of app refreshes with the same bunch of apps open in the background. But that is what that is, and that tends to happen on pretty much any Android device, so it is what it is. Now, jumping over to the hardware and the software on the Moto Xperia Edition. In particular, when we talk about the hardware, the Moto Xperia Edition has 3 gigs of RAM and 16 gigs of onboard storage. Again, it has a micro SD card slot, which you can also use as expandable adaptable storage. It has, again, a 5.7-inch IPS LCD display, and it has a 3000 milliamp hour battery on the rear with 21 megapixel camera on the rear and 5 megapixel camera on the front, and dual front firing speakers. In terms of the software, again, bumpy cam, my bad. We are running, again, a stock build of Android 8.0 Nougat this time, but we're not running the latest and greatest, but it's okay. But, like I said with the Moto G6, we just have a few custom Motorola gestures thrown in. So now let's get into the similarities and the differences between the software, and then I'm going to let you know how I feel about the Moto Xperia Edition in terms of software and daily performance. Now, in terms of similarities, both phones have your signature Motorola features in them. So you got your chop for the flashlight, okay? You also have your twist to launch the camera from any screen, even sleep. So you could twist to get to the rear camera, you could twist to get to the front, so on and so forth. You also have your Moto display on both devices. So let me show you this real quick. If I turn the display off, all I have to do is wave my hand in front of the display to activate the Moto display. Now, she's being picky right now because the battery low, but you can see it just looks a little bit differently across the displays, but it's pretty much the same functionality. So with your Moto display, you can interact with your notifications strictly or directly from the lock screen. No need to wake up the device. So if you want to respond to a text message or something like that, or you want to swipe away a notification, it's just going to work. So it's really good stuff there. Now, let's point out some differences here, and then we're going to keep it moving. Now, in terms of differences, because you have a fingerprint sensor on the Moto G6, that gives you access to a few more features. In particular, you have the ability to use one-button nav on the Moto G6, so that gives you the ability to turn off your on-screen keys and use your fingerprint sensor to navigate through the whole OS. You also have Secure Key or Motorola Key, which allows you for the device to store all your passwords on device and log into your apps and websites using just the fingerprint sensor. So that really is a nice feature. Now, some additional features that you get on the Moto G6 that you don't get on the Moto X, the Moto X Pure Edition, regardless of fingerprint sensor or not, is you have your swipe to shrink the screen. So you just swipe diagonally from the middle of the screen to any of the edges, and it'll shrink the screen. You also have your flip over to do not disturb, and so on and so forth. Another similar feature that you have on both devices is you have your Moto Voice on both devices. But I just want to point out, I think it runs a little bit better on the older Moto X Pure Edition, but it is what it is. So we pretty much covered the differences and the similarities in software. Now talking about the Moto X Pure Edition in terms of day-to-day performance, I have to say that it's okay. It's getting a little old to the teeth. I'm experiencing a lot of hiccups and a lot of apps slow down with a bunch of apps open in the background. So it is what it is. It's the old guy now. It's the OG. But that pretty much covers the hardware and software on both devices. And pretty much, in terms of the hardware, I have to call it a tie. In terms of the software, I have to give the W to the Moto G6. It's just a little bit more fluid and a little bit more snappy, in my opinion. Alright, now, moving on, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys and gals is the overall Wi-Fi performance in both of these devices. Now, in terms of the Wi-Fi performance, these devices are tied across the board. They both have Wi-Fi 802.11b GNN and AC dual band Wi-Fi. So that means that you can take advantage of your 2.4 gigahertz band and your 5 gigahertz band as long as you have a router that supports both bands. So whether you're at work or you're at home, as long as your router supports both bands, you should be good to go. But I know y'all are here for the Wi-Fi performance test, so let me just go ahead and pull up a YouTube video. I think it's non-copyrighted music. It is. And this will also double as your speaker test as well. So one thing I want to point out before we get started is that the Moto G6 does have built-in Adobe surround sound, so you can see it right there. But to keep it fair, I've disabled it for this video because the Moto X Pure Edition does not have that. But you have customizable sound profiles that you can go in and tweak, and you can also add custom profiles as well. But you have some presets as well. But just wanted to point that out real quick. Now let's get started. Now I've already set the volumes on these to 75%. I'm going to let them play a little bit. I'm going to scrub through the video so you can see how the Wi-Fi performs. Then I'm going to let you know about the how I feel about the speakers, and we're going to keep it moving. So we're going to start with the Moto G6. Enjoy, everybody. Let me jump back to the beginning. Alright, let's get to scrubbing. Oops. Okay, so there you go. The speaker performance and the Wi-Fi performance on the Moto G6. Now give me a second, let's go over the Moto X Pure Edition. Bring it back to the beginning. Here we go. Okay, let's get to scrubbing. Alright, so real quick speaker test, real quick Wi-Fi performance test. Now, as you guys have seen, in terms of the Wi-Fi, I'd have to call it a tie. Now, in terms of the speaker performance, I'd have to give the edge to the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, in terms of the overall performance, I found that, in my opinion, the Moto X Pure Edition gets louder, clearer, and packs in a little bit more bass, whereas the Moto G6 still maintains a nice loudness and a nice clarity, but it's lacking a little bit in the bass department. Keep in mind that this is just in my opinion. Now, let's keep it moving. So, W for the speakers in goes to the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, up next, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the overall LTE and bands coverage in both of these guys. And now I'll go ahead and throw up some screenshots so y'all can see it more clearly. But in terms of LTE and band support, both of these guys are globally unlocked devices. So maybe you're asking me, yo E, what does that mean? That means that these devices will work on any major carrier in the United States and any GSM carrier abroad, as well as any MVNO carrier in the United States as well. So they'll work on Sprint, they'll work on Verizon, they'll work on AT&T, they'll work on T-Mobile, and any of the MVNOs like Boost, Cricket, Virgin, whatever. They're just gonna work. And you're not gonna have any issues. Yeah. Metro PCS. That was that last one I was trying to remember. But they're just going to work, and you're not going to have any issues there. So in terms of LTE and band support, I'm going to have to call it a tie. And this is actually one of my favorite things about these devices. So no longer do I need to worry about, paying for unlock codes. Will my SIM work on this? Nope. Drop it in. It's plug and play. It pretty much picks it up automatically, and it's just going to work. At most, if it doesn't pick it up automatically, I have to configure APNs or just tweak a little bit of settings, but it's pretty much straightforward, and they pretty much work regardless. I haven't had to mess with anything in terms of the LTE or band coverage in either of these devices. So, it's a tie in overall band support. Now, moving on. The next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the overall Bluetooth and Bluetooth performance in both of these devices. And in the interest of speed, I'm just going to tell y'all straight up. In terms of Bluetooth, I'm going to give a W to the Moto G6. And the whole reason is, I've had tons of Bluetooth issues with the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, the upgrade to Android 7.0 Nougat has helped, but I'm still running into a few issues from time to time, whereas the Bluetooth performance on the Moto G6 is top notch, and I have yet to run into any issues. But in case you were wondering what versions are in each, in terms of the version in the Moto X Pure Edition, we got Bluetooth version 4.1. In the Moto G6, we have Bluetooth version 4.2. So it doesn't vary by much, but there are some big performance gaps in between these two when it comes to the Bluetooth. And that's why the Moto G6 is taking the W in this category. Now, moving on. The next thing I want to talk about with you guys and gals is probably one of the big features for me, aside from the Bluetooth performance. This is absolutely a core, must be good thing that needs to be in these smartphones, and that is the GPS performance. So let me go ahead and pull up a recent screenshot for you guys, just so you have a reference, and we're going to talk about my experiences. Now, I found that in my experience that the GPS on either of these devices works extremely good, and I haven't had any issues. I haven't had any issues with anything that has to take advantage of the GPS, whether it be turn-by-turn navigation or geotagging for things like Pokemon Go, so on and so forth. It's been a breeze on either device. And yes, I did try Pokemon Go for a little bit, and then I uninstalled it. I ain't got time for all that. But it did work, no problem, and turn-by-turn with Google navigation work flawlessly on either device. And this really is something that needs to be there on my devices in particular, because I rely very heavily on the GPS in my devices on a day-to-day basis. So I'm very happy to report that the GPS performance in each of these devices was top notch. So we're calling that a tie. Up next, another core aspect of the phones that needs to be there, at least in what I would consider to be my daily driver. Let's talk about the call quality through the receivers and the speaker call quality. Now, in terms of the call quality through the built-in receivers, I found that it was top notch as long as I was in areas with proper coverage. I didn't have any issues with callers on the other end, and they didn't have any issues hearing me, and they said I was very loud, crisp, and clear. Now, as I was prepping for this versus / comparison video, I used the Moto G6 on Verizon, in particular Verizon Straight Talk with my Straight Talk SIM, and I used the Moto X Pure Edition on T-Mobile with my T-Mobile SIM. Keep in mind, your results may vary based on your carrier and your overall coverage supported by your carrier. But at least for me, the overall call quality and speaker call quality was pretty good. Now, I did notice a difference in the speaker call quality, in being that it was a little bit louder and clearer on the Moto X Pure Edition, whereas it wasn't as loud on the Moto G6. Still was pretty clear, it just wasn't as loud. So that pretty much covers the overall call quality and speaker call quality. Sorry, I forgot to take the GPS down, my bad. But in that regard, we're going to have to give it a tie in the receivers and a win in the speaker calls for the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, up next, let's talk about the cameras and the camera interfaces. Now, in the interest of speed, I'm just going to talk about my overall camera experiences and how I feel about the cameras. If you would like a more in-depth look at the camera interfaces, please feel free to check out links to my full reviews on either of these devices, which will be linked down below in the video description. Alright, now, talking about the cameras, again, the Moto Xperia Edition has a 21 megapixel rear firing camera, which is capable of videos of up to 4K at 30 frames per second, and as low as 720p 30 frames per second, or 720p 120 frames per second slow motion on the rear. On the front, it's capable of capturing 1080p videos up to 30 frames a second and 720p 120 frames per second slow motion. Is really good stuff. Really good stuff. Tons of camera samples for the Moto Xperia Edition on the channel. Is really good. Now, jumping over to the Moto G, again, we have a 12 megapixel and a 5 megapixel camera on the rear, and this one taps out at 1080p 60 frames per second, but you do have the ability to go all the way down to 720p 30 frames per second, or take 720p 120 frames per second slow motion video with the rear. Talking about the front, we maxing out at 1080p 30 frames per second, and we don't have the ability to take slow motion video recording with the front facing cameras. And because I forgot it like a noob, you got a 5 megapixel camera on the front of the Moto Xperia Edition, and you got an 8 megapixel camera on the front of the Moto G6. Now, putting down the technical specs and going camera for camera, photo for photo, I would call it a tie in my opinion. Regardless of whichever phone you decide to pick up, these cameras on these phones, if I could stop getting tongue-tied, are really, really good, regardless of whichever phone you decide to pick up. If you just want to reach in, snatch your phone, take a quick photo, take a quick video, 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up with a really good photo or a really good video, regardless of the phones that you decide to pick up. So in that regard, I'm going to have to say it's a tie in terms of overall camera performance. Alright, now, let's keep it moving. Up next now, this is where I wanted to talk about the gaming, and then, you know, typically I don't touch too much on this in versus videos, but I had to point something out that really saddened me. Now, in terms of light gaming, didn't run into any issues, but when I tested graphically intensive games and longer gameplay sessions, both devices tended to get warm, really warm, and they really tended to start glitching, stuttering, and sometimes even crashing. So if you are a heavy gamer and you're looking at picking up either one of these devices, I would have to say you may want to look elsewhere. But if you're a light gamer or casual gamer, these devices will serve you well. And one thing to keep in mind, you got an Adreno 418 GPU on the Moto Xperia Edition, and you got an Adreno 506 GPU on the Moto G6. So just keep that in mind so you know how to, adjust your expectations accordingly. But that being said, they both taken the L in terms of graphic intensive games and longer gameplay sessions. They're both taking the W for the lighter games and the light gameplay sessions. So we got a tie in that regard, which is really, really bad in my opinion, because this is the newer device. The Moto G6 is the newer device. Why does the newer device have heating issues and stuttering issues when it comes to the gaming performance? I can accept that from the Moto Xperia Edition, which I won't, because it's an older device, but no, you need to perform at your best at all times. Sorry, else. But, let's move forward. Now, moving on to the benchmarks, and in the interest of speed, I'm just going to tell you guys, these two phones performed exactly where I was expecting it to. Again, old school flagship chip in the form of the Snapdragon 808 and the Adreno 418 GPU. New school mid-range chip in the form of the Snapdragon 450 octa-core and the Adreno 506 GPU, and they pretty much scored exactly where I was expecting them to. Now, if you want a more in-depth look at the benchmark scores, including the full benchmark stats, again, feel free to check out links to my full review, which will be available on either of these devices down below in the video description. Now, let's move on to one of my next favorite parts and one of my core features that each device needs to have. And that is the battery life and the overall charge times. Now, one thing I want to clarify before I jump into this is that I am an extremely heavy user. Anything that I can do for my smartphone, I will do for my smartphone. So that being said, things like streaming movies and music, watching YouTube, downloading songs, downloading movies, all of that stuff I do for my smartphone. A little bit of video editing, a lot of photos, a lot of video, so on and so forth. All that stuff gets done from my smartphone. Emails, you name it. Social media, all of them, except for Snapchat. Don't like Snapchat. It is what it is. Don't judge me. But, in that regard, I have to say, the Moto X Pure Edition gets killed, okay? In terms of battery life for the Moto X Pure Edition, it was pretty bad when I first got the device. I was rarely, if ever, able to get more than 4 hours of screen on time. Now it's gotten even worse. I'm lucky if I get 2 to 3 hours of screen on time. Even worse, I'm lucky if I can get through half the day without running for the charger. So I found that I typically have to plug up with the Moto X Pure Edition 3 times during the day, which is horrendous. But the saving grace is it does top up fairly quickly. Now, sadly, I gotta tell you again, I actually broke my traditional turbo charger. So I had to replace it with a new school turbocharger, and sadly, it does not charge as fast. Oop, bumpy cam, and it shows. Sorry, y'all. So, that being said, in terms of the overall battery life, the Moto X Pure Edition taking that L. Now, talking about the Moto G6, in terms of overall battery life with my style of heavy usage, I'm easily able to get casually 7 to 10 hours of screen on time. Alright? If I want to stretch it and push it, then I'm getting anywhere from about 7 to 13 hours of screen on time. Alright? And I'm easily able to get through the day on a single charge, which is something that I'm happy about, but I feel could have been better. Alright? But it is what it is. A lot better battery life on the Moto G6 than on the Moto X Pure Edition. That being said, again, when we talk about the charge times, it's again extremely similar. I found that we're getting anywhere from about an hour and a half to an hour and 50 minutes on both devices. Keep in mind, your results may vary depending on when and where you plug your devices onto the charger at and what percentage you plug them onto the charger at. I'm telling y'all these results in aspects with 10% to 100, 15% to 100, and 20% to 100, or 0 to 100. So if you're plugging in at 20%, then you're going to get probably about an hour and a half. You're plugging in at about 50%, then you potentially could get about an hour and 50 minutes to get up to a full charge. Plugging in at 30%, you're probably looking at something like an hour and a half to 50 minutes. 45%, you're probably looking at 30 minutes to 35 minutes to 45 minutes, so on and so forth. It all depends on how you use your device and when you plug it onto the charger. Alright, so that pretty much does it for the battery life and the overall charge times. So an L for the overall battery life for the Moto X Pure Edition, and a tie in the overall charge times. Now let's get into the price and get into this final part of the video. I'm going to give y'all the pricing and give you guys my final thoughts and a recommendation or two. Now, talking about the Moto Xperia Edition, it's available right now today for anywhere ranging from about $190 brand new to $330 brand new. And specifically, I did that research with the basis that you're looking for the 3 gigs of RAM variant and the 32 gigs of onboard storage variant. That's not the variant that y'all see in this video. The variant that's in this video is, again, the 3 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of storage variant, okay? And the Moto G6, I did that same thing. So the variant that I looked into was the 3 gigs of RAM and the 32 gigs of onboard storage variant. There is another variant for the Moto G6 which has 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of onboard storage. I did not look into that one when I was doing my research, when I was getting results together for this particular versus video. Okay, so that being said, the Moto Xperia Edition again can be had from anywhere from about $190 to $330 brand new. Get it out, boss. Alright, now if you're willing to get it used or refurbished, you're going to be able to find it a lot cheaper. But I decided to go with strictly the brand new variants. Okay, so you're getting a fresh brand new device. Okay, whereas with the Moto G6, after doing my research, I found that you can get it for anywhere from about $200 to $350, depending on where you get it from. Alright, if you get it used, you may be able to get it slightly cheaper at about $189 or $190-ish, so that kind of ties it up. So based on those pricing results, there's probably about a $20 difference on the high end and about a $10 difference on the low end. And when it's lined up so closely, then I have to say that it comes down to personal preference and what you guys and gals think you're going to be able to take more advantage of. Okay, maybe you're a fan of the all glass design and the fingerprint sensor and the 18:9 aspect ratio, then I would say go with the Moto G6. Maybe you're a fan of the dual front firing speakers, the big quad HD display, again some really solid cameras, then I would say go with the Moto Xperia Edition, just as long as you don't mind having to plug in your device maybe 2-3 times a day based on your usage style. Okay, so that pretty much does it for my versus/comparison video between the Moto Xperia Edition and the Moto G6. If you guys and gals enjoyed this video or found it helpful in any way, shape, or form, please help your boy out and give the video a thumbs up. That really does help me out. You don't know how much. If you want to see more raw, uncut content like this, but you never really know what's going to happen when I push record, please feel free to hit that subscribe button down below and click off the notification bell icon right next to it so y'all get notified when I post new videos. As always, if this video has piqued anyone's interest, all links to where to pick up these 2 devices at some really great prices will be located down below in the video description. So if your interest is piqued, down below in the video description should be like a one-stop shop for you guys, and you should be good to go. In particular, I will just have prices to the devices down below in the video description, because if I try to pack in everything due to YouTube's character restrictions in the video description, I'm not going to have enough space for everything. So if you want to know where you could find recommended cases, recommended screen protectors, recommended micro SD cards, please click on the links to the full reviews, and y'all find all those links down below in the full review section. Alright, so that being said, I hope everyone has a great evening, and as always, if you guys and gals know anyone out there looking for the best performing devices and products at the cheapest possible prices, please share with them my channel, because I'm doing this for everyone because we all deserve the best. Hope everyone has a great evening again, and I will catch you guys and gals in my next video. Peace.